Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by onX. So today what I want to talk about with onX is the log and cut feature. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is we're getting ready to really dive into, the heart of whitetail hunting across the country. And this can be applied to out west as well, but mostly whitetails. I recently wrote an article for Peterson's Bow Hunting magazine that's in this month's, which I believe is the October issue, and it just came out. So you can pick that up in newsstands now, or subscribe to it. But it's all about logging cuts and how to utilize them in the big wood setting. So here in Pennsylvania, I use the onX feature. I turn on logging cuts, and what that does is, or timber cuts as it's called on the Hunt app, and on any national forest lands, it'll show up the timber cut, the year it was cut, whether it was clear cutted, select cutted, everything else. Gives a lot of detail with it. And I use that a lot when I'm scouting any of these type of areas, and it works that way all the way across the country. And what I'm able to do is be able to, figure out by the age of the clear cut what it's going to look like, what to expect from it. Cuts that are, 1 to 3 years old, ones that are 3 to 8 years old, and then cuts that are 8 years and older. That's kind of how I break down the three different types of cuts. And you can use this feature to really help with scouting and pinpoint some of these areas, as I call it, the big woods food plot. So check out the onX Hunt app at onxmaps.com. You can use the coupon code EMW to save yourself 20% off. Maven Optics. So Maven, I've been using Maven for quite a few years now, and for whitetail hunting, I'm using their B3 models in an 8x30. It's a super small package, and I like that because I don't need to see real far with whitetails, even though with an 8 power you can see pretty good. But in the timbered woods, it's great to be able to keep it on your neck. It's lightweight, it doesn't get in the way, and you can use it at any time. So I use that with just a Sitka harness, and the little tiny package coming in around $500, $525 depending on your magnification. You can get these little set of binos, and it's the same quality glass that are in some of their bigger options. So really useful to have, especially in low light. If you want to check out Maven Optics, go to mavenbuilt.com. Use the code EastMeetsWest-gift to get a free gift with any full price optics order. The University of Elk Hunting, Corey Jacobson, and Elk 101, they've put together the most fully comprehensive elk hunting course available. And this is the time, to really get into it, whether you're going to be rifle hunting this year as we're getting close to the end of the bow season, or preparing for a hunt next year. And everything down to one of the sections that can be really helpful is the budgeting section with time and money. And, being a year out from September, that can be extremely helpful to, know how much time you need to kind of allot, figure out how to get it off work, from your wife, husband, or whatever that might be. And so you can check that out in just one of the modules within the online course. Use the code EastMeetsWest to save yourself 20% off. So I didn't think I was going to release an episode this week because I am currently on an elk hunt, but I hopefully have a bull down at this point. We'll be optimistic here. And so this will be coming out, and I'll be in the second week of elk hunting out there with my cousin Mason and my good buddy Michael, and with Justin Mueller filming the whole thing. So I'm excited for that to all come out. But in the process this week, hopefully I'm not leaking information too soon, but as of, the time of me recording this, it's planned to come out this week, and that is the new film from Sitka called A Quiet Place. And what this film is it's actually a film of Jim Holt Jr., who I hunted with in Alberta last year. They did this whole film while I was there, and I actually got to be a part of it, and it's to help with the promotion of the new Fanatic line. So I'm really excited to have everyone check that out. Jim's a super intense dude and extremely knowledgeable about whitetail hunting, specifically in the bow zone of Alberta. That I don't know about you, but I grew up reading those articles and always wanting to go there. So it was a dream come true for me to get to go there last year. And the new Fanatic line is just extremely quiet and warm, where I sat in temperatures well below zero. And it's a really cool system for that. So the new film should be out now. Check it out over at YouTube, sickagear.com, and wherever else they release it. Like I said, hopefully I'm not releasing this information too early, but I'm pretty sure it should be coming out around this time. So go ahead and be looking for that. All right, so let's get into the episode here with Land Tawney and also my buddy Clint Campbell, who co-hosted it with me from the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast.
All right, folks, welcome back. You are listening to a unique episode of this podcast. This is a co-brand podcast with myself, Clint, from Truth from the Stand, and I have my buddy Bo Martonic from East Meets West.
Yeah, it's going to be a good episode. And a couple of them here, we're going to kind of co-brand here, kind of collaborating and doing some recording here. So I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, we're showing a little unity in the hunting space here, a little unity.
Let's get more of that.
Right? Yeah,
exactly. How about it?
So you might, those of you out there listening, you might be familiar with the gentleman's voice who just chimed in. We are at the Muster in the Mountains events for BHA. This is our East Coast event, and we're joined by none other than Land Tawney. How's it going, man?
Dude, I'm having a great time. I love being here, have all these people come in. We have people like from Kentucky, people from New York, people from Ohio. Like all these people are coming in, and the party's just starting, so I'm excited for today.
Yeah, I was surprised with the different, because, coming into this, I wasn't sure how widespread it was going to be. I was thinking like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, might get a few West Virginians, maybe a couple Ohioans. Is that even, or a Buckeye maybe? Is a better way to phrase it.
There it
is. Yeah, English words, they mean things. But I was surprised. Like you said, I've seen people from Kentucky and Virginia, which is, it's super cool. It just kind of shows the growth that we've had on the East Coast and how people are getting engaged and supporting the movement that the BHA has kind of put forth and supporting the vision. So it's
absolutely,
it's exciting to see.
And I think this is our biggest party that we've ever had east of the Mississippi.
Yeah,
and we're born in the West, but as you just described, like we're growing here in the East, and this is our biggest event yet. So I think people just wanted to be around it, and I think they've found their team and they want to be around their team.
Yeah,
and so this is a great way for all these people to kind of meet each other.
Yeah,
and if not. If they have, maybe it's reconnecting with people they've only seen like once or twice.
Right.
So
yeah, I know last night coming in early, my wife and I went back to our Airbnb. I'm a camp type. She's more of a glamp type, maybe.
You had to like say that online, like
Yeah,
like,
podcast all about transparency, and we're not hiding anything here.
And I bet she doesn't listen to your podcast. Does
no,
she?
she has in the past. Actually, she listened to like a recent one, and she made a comment. She's like, "What do you mean by something like I didn't say battle axe, but it was maybe something as bad as that, right?" And she's like, "What did she mean by that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's just hunting talk, babe. Like, it's just what I say with the guys. So it went over like a Led Zeppelin, and it was not good. But I think before we get too far into this, you're well known, of course, in the space. But for anyone out there that's listening to this podcast and maybe got into this kind of new and doesn't have as much background on who you are and what you do, if you wouldn't mind, just give us the Cliff Notes version of that.
Yeah, so I'm very lucky. I grew up in Montana, fifth generation. My family was very involved in conservation. My dad was the first lawyer for the Elk Foundation when they started in 1985 until he passed away in 95. I would say that my father passing away is why I'm here today. Okay. Really, it created this huge hole, but at the same time, it's an opportunity for me to kind of follow in his footsteps a little bit. And so I got a wildlife biology degree at the University of Montana. Fresh out of school, was with the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership for a little bit, for 3.5 years, and then went to work for the National Wildlife Federation. And then 6 years ago, came over here to BHA. And, BHA, as they started around a campfire, 2004, all good things happen around a campfire late at night. Can't wait for this big one we're going to have tonight.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But they've looked at the playing field of all the sportsmen's organizations that are out there, and nobody's really focused on public lands and public waters. Great work being done by the Elk Foundation, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, but nobody's really focused on public lands. And so their idea was to make sure that we have access to public lands and waters, and then the fish and wildlife habitat when you get there. Very simple. Now that starts all the way from a local level. Here in Pennsylvania, they're working on Sunday hunting right now, so that's like just more opportunity. Then there's things that we work on in Washington D.C. as well. And so it's just, again, that base is always trying to make sure you have access to public lands and waters. And, we could have access to a parking lot, but we don't want that, right? We want access to good quality habitat when we get there. So that's what we're working on.
Right. And just an important, I think, thing for folks out there to know, I guess, is that even though we are backcountry hunters and anglers, right? Like the access isn't just for those folks, right? It's not just like there's benefits beyond just those of us who like to go afield or like to throw a line in a stream, right? It's like anyone out there, whether it's a bird watcher, whether it's a hiker, a camper, whatever the case is. Like we're all kind of in this together. It would be nice if we could figure out ways that we could all start to share maybe a little bit more of the burden, if you will,
sure.
or pushing for the progress, maybe. But I think that'll come as we continue to do events like this and people get involved. I think it's just an exciting time.
I mean, I'd go further. I mean, I think you're exactly right that there's a lot of like this shared kind of experience, whether that's like the solitude, the challenge, the adventure that you can go have on public lands. And so whether you're a mountain biker, a kayaker, a backcountry skier, I think we all share that. So there's that piece. But I would also say that, the outdoor economy, which is $887 billion in this country, which is sustainable and something that we can grow, like that should mean something to every American. And then clean air and clean water, clean air and clean water, like we all depend on that, right? Yeah. And the majority of that comes from our public lands. And so to me, if you don't hunt or fish or utilize our public lands, like clean air and clean water still matter to you. And so I think that matters to all Americans. And so I think we're all trying to figure out ways to work more together, and I think there's some indication that that's working.
Right. Yeah. I think I think if you go to places that we take some of those things for granted, right? I coming from Pennsylvania, right? I've never had an issue with clean air, clean water where I grew up, right?
Sure.
Because I grew up in, as we were talking before we hopped on the podcast, Pennsylvania. Bo's from PA as well, from rural PA. But when you think about places, not to bring up a sore subject, but places like Flint, Michigan, right, comes to mind, right? It's like the basic, what we would consider to be things you should just naturally have, like almost like a God-given right? They don't have, right? And they're struggling with it. It's causing some serious health concerns, which then parlays into, a healthcare system that's strapped and increasing costs there, which impacts Americans. So it's not just, I think all these things people fail somewhat whenever they look at it as an isolated, episode or incident, right? There's downstream effects that all these things have.
No pun intended.
Right, exactly. That, if people really understood what that meant for the downstream kind of, impact, it does become an issue to them because maybe they don't hunt, maybe they don't hike, maybe they don't care about fishing or whatever. That's fine. But like, do you care about these other ancillary things that are going to impact you, and not just you, but generations to come?
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
yeah, and it's funny because so I grew up in the heart of the Pennsylvania wilds area, the Allegheny National Forest, everything. So I never realized, how lucky I was to have that. I just could go out my door and hunt, wherever. That's just
you had a big backyard.
Yeah,
you had a big backyard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when I moved away to the Pittsburgh area for a while, that's when I really appreciated it. When I couldn't just, I'm like, what do you mean I can't? Just hunt anywhere. It was just, I was completely blinded by it until, then I ended up moving back and I just appreciated it so much more. And my normal career, as an environmental and safety engineer, the environmental part, I work in a factory, but it's all about the water regulation, what's going in there, doing sampling, that stuff, the air permitting, and just kind of, so I look at it all from a different point of view now than I did. I think a lot more people are kind of with BHA kind of coming up and a lot of other, positive things that just able to relate to it a little bit more and just think of it in a different light. I guess it's out there a little bit more now than ever, and it's an awesome thing to see.
I think that thing you said about taking things for granted, like I think that's something that we all need to be like thinking about. Yeah. And like these 640 million acres that belongs to everybody. Like if you don't know where that came from and you don't know kind of like what's going on with that, like that apathy, like that is like going to be the demise of these public lands that are, that are unique in the world. And so these public lands that, it doesn't matter who your parents are, it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, doesn't matter how much money you made last year. Like, they belong to all of us.
Right.
Like, that piece, like, that's the aspirational piece that we're trying to like preach, because that's only been around for about 140 years, you know?
Right.
And so like it could go away. And like once that goes away, you very rarely get that back.
Right. And it's one of those things that I say, and I know that there's, I believe Canada has some public lands and so forth as well, but it's one of those things, if you look across the globe, that is very quintessentially almost American,
Totally.
right? That we have that, right? And it's one of those things. We have a lot of freedoms and privileges that we were willing to go to bat and fight for,
Yeah.
right? And this seems to be kind of the forgotten one.
Yeah, well, this is, and it's again, I don't think there's anything more American than our public lands. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
I mean, they're it's very democratic the way they're managed. You know, I mean, everybody has a voice.
Yep.
Which sometimes, that's discouraging because maybe we don't get exactly what we want. But I think that's an important piece about it is that they're managed for multiple use, the majority of them. And that means not all uses all the time everywhere, right? And so there's like, I think people that manage our public lands, like, it's one of the hardest jobs ever, right? Like, you're trying to make everybody happy. That's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, and then they're charged with managing all the dissenting opinions, right?
Absolutely.
And those dissenting opinions, just like in a court of law, makes whatever it is you come out with stronger, right? Because
Absolutely.
you've had the opportunity to hear all sides.
Absolutely.
I want to comment on something, or just kind of follow up on something you had mentioned, just about taking things for granted and stuff like that. Because it feels like, and I wanted to get your perspective on this, because you have a great bird's eye view with what you do, but the apathy seems like it's more significant in the East versus the West. Like, whenever, like, the friends that I have in the West, right, they seem much more in tune with what's going on in their public spaces, what's going on with their environment and stuff like that. It seems like on the East Coast, people just aren't quite as connected to it. And I don't know if you see that as well with, like, the BHA in terms of, like, numbers, what regions are growing the most and what types of actions, regions are taking or not taking, maybe might be a better way to put it. So just from your perspective, do you see that, and what do you kind of attribute that to, if you do see it?
I don't know if I totally see that. I think that, and if there is that piece, I would say it in a couple of ways. I mean, you talked about the Allegheny here.
Yeah.
There's public lands all over the eastern part of the United States, but it's not as prevalent as it is in the West, right? And so it's not as everyday. You grew up, in Allegheny, so that's like, I think you're a little bit unique in that piece. But I think, so maybe there's that disconnect a little bit from public lands because there just isn't as much, out here in the East. But like the Pennsylvania chapter right now, it's growing like a weed. And like, I made a bet with one of the chapter leaders at Rendezvous that, and he says that they're going to have the most membership by 2021.
Nice.
Now, we've only bet a bottle of whiskey, so it's not like there's a huge problem.
And everyone's winning on that,
exactly,
so
exactly.
Let's be fair.
But it's the ambition. I think, again, like, even if you didn't grow up right next to the Allegheny and it's in your backyard, like, that 640 million acres belongs to everybody. And I think, that public landowner shirt, that's kind of a slogan that we use all the time. Once people figure that out, that apathy changes pretty quickly. But if you don't know that piece, I've traveled all over the country, and especially when I'm in airports, and you wear that T-shirt, and either you're getting high fives or somebody's like, "What does that mean?"
Yeah.
And it's this little short conversation. All of a sudden, it's like, and their mind is blown, right?
Yeah.
And to me, so it's about teaching. I think once you teach, and so maybe people out in the West, just because they're around it more, they know more about it. And then once you teach people that don't know anything about it, they're super excited and more engaged in it.
Yeah. It's funny. I wore that shirt to my grandparents' house one day.
Yeah.
And my grandpa, I think he's 85 years old. He goes, "Public landowner. What land do you own?" Wait, public. He's like trying to figure it out. He's thinking too deep into it. And I was explaining it. And it was funny. But so, like you were saying how it's unique that I grew up in that area. I hosted a pint night there, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago now. And a lot of people showed up, but I was really surprised still, even in my hometown area, that weren't familiar with, well, one, BHA, and also just kind of like the threats that are out there for public lands and how lucky we are, because like I said, the taking for granted piece of it, and kind of to your point a little bit on that, I didn't realize that there was a gap like that, especially in it seemed like the middle age kind of generation with it. It was I guess the younger generation seems to be picking up on it a little bit more, where it seemed like around my father's age and stuff like that, like they just that's just what it was, and didn't think much more about it.
Sure.
That's not, I don't want to put a blanket statement out there, but for the majority, that's what it kind of seemed like. Right. So it's cool to be able to kind of put
get that word out, and even through different things like pint nights, and
Right.
everyone likes to drink beer and talk hunting, so might as well have a good purpose behind
like you're
it.
building like a community, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I think people are starving. I mean, it's like this internet world that we're living in. It's like it's kind of easy to communicate with like likes and like a one little comment. Like conversations we're having right now, I think people are starving for it. And so when you have like a pint night, and yes, beer brings people together since they've had the first beer, right?
Yeah.
But
It's a little social lubrication.
exactly. But I think it's like people are wanting to have conversations,
Yeah.
and this idea that we communicate by memes, and stuff like that, like is ridiculous to me. Like people want to talk, and so I think thank you for doing that for one, and then two, when you're at those things, like you're educating people, right? Like, and it's in a soft way. You're not like this shall be that way. You're just having conversations, and then those conversations, those fingers go out someplace else, and then hopefully they're talking to people when they get home.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the important part too is that people need to recognize that supporting conservation, you can do it in a multitude of ways, right? I wrote an article for a publication that was around the idea of using your natural abilities and like your God-given talents to support conservation. Because, for example, it's like, you pay your dues, maybe you're part of BHA and you pay your membership, every year and stuff like that. And maybe you can't go into your pocket to give more, and that's okay.
Sure.
It's like there's a lot of other ways. Like if you're a forester or something like that, you can be helping your chapter do habitat reconstruction, rehabilitation.
Absolutely.
If you're a CPA, you can help your chapter by helping them with their books. Everyone needs
Absolutely.
like financial or legal help, right?
Yeah.
So it's like
Hopefully not legal help.
hopefully not legal help. Yeah, let's stay away from that. But in the event,
Yeah. It's always good to have a lawyer to keep you out of trouble.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But there's a lot of different ways, whether you start a business and you donate back, like through, like the profits that you make or whatever,
Totally.
right? So there's a lot of different ways to do that. So I want to talk about, I think, your vision for BHA, because, I want to get a sense of like, in your opinion, a kind of a state of the union, like where are we at now, right? And then what is, we've come very far in a short period of time, right?
Yeah.
And so what is our vision for the future? Like what do you see us kind of turning into?
I'll give you kind of like the cliff notes of like where we're at right now. So we're at 37,000 members. I'll put that in perspective. 6 years ago, we were at 1,000 members. So that's been quite a growth.
Yeah.
To kind of the driving part of that is chapters. And so now we have state chapters in 45 states around the country. 2 Canadian provinces, 1 territory up in Yukon. And so that's where we're at there. Staff-wise, 6 years ago, it was myself and a couple part-time staff. Now we have 30 full-time staff, and that the majority of those are chapter coordinators around the country to help build our chapters. So Chris Hennessy here in Pennsylvania, I mean, that's, I think where we have staff on the ground that can facilitate and encourage and then really connect like folks. We're growing like gangbusters right now. And so that's kind of like the state of where we are. I guess the last thing I would say is that when I first started, our funding really came from a couple foundations. Like about 90% of our funding was there, and that's a scary place to be. Now, like we're way more diverse in our funding. And so that's something I'll talk about like now as a piece, is that like the more diverse we get, it doesn't matter what happens on the outside, we're going to be okay. And membership is a big piece of that. And, that $25 or the $100 a year for sustaining or life memberships, like all that is adding into a pot that is unrestricted money. And so we can use that for whatever we want. And that's, keeping the lights on, it's getting staff out on the ground. And so when I look at our chapter coordinators and having 10, 11 of those right now, some of them have 6, 7 states that they're working in. And that's way too much, too much. I've done this kind of work and I feel like probably 2 states is about right. If you only have 1 state, then there's nothing to like kind of compare it to. Plus it's like, I think you get too focused on that piece, and then you can't learn things from other places. And so vision for me is really to have those chapter coordinators, 1 for every 2 states, 1 for every 2 Canadian provinces and territories. And so that way we have people on the ground that can really kind of build this army. Membership, I said 37,000. What's the future look like? I think, we've been punching way above our weight for a long time. And so now that we have 37,000 members, we're like, we're in that heavyweight class, but like, what's going to happen when we're at 100,000? Right. I'm super excited about that piece. And so, don't just grow members to, for membership's sake, there's that money piece, but it's really like those people being engaged and like being able to call, like show up and do events, do a cleanup, do some repairing, like restoration. And so super important, to kind of continue to grow that piece. And then like that diversifying of money, I think that, working with our corporate partners and all that piece, like that just helps us be more sustainable. Right. But what's the future look like? Man, I want us to be the go-to organization all over this country, all over the world when it comes to public lands and public waters. And so that when a decision is being made, that we're able to include the voices of the people on the ground. And that's really what our job is as staff, is to be a megaphone for those people.
Yeah, and like you said, the community aspect of it is where it's probably why it's growing so quickly, because everyone's so engaged, and it's not just a membership that you pay every year because you think it's for a good cause. It's people want to be involved in it, are just super pumped. Like the energy of this event is like, it's awesome. Like, gets me pumped up, and
that's all across the country, man. I went to Indiana where they got like 1-2% public land, and I was like, or no, it was Iowa, excuse me, and I was like, what, like, why are you guys? And they're just like fired up, man, and they want to grow what they already have right now. Yeah. But they also they want to be able to go into the West. They want to go into Pennsylvania and be able to check out their kingdom, as I like to call it, right?
Right.
But no, it's I think that vision really for me is us to be sustainable, and which means money. It means being able to facilitate folks on the ground. And then I think it's being the go-to organization when it comes to public lands and public water.
Right. I know we're a little short on time because I think you have an announcement that's coming up. But
is that what Chris came in here with?
Yeah, he gave us the 2-minute mark.
Yeah, I don't get my own life anymore. People tell me what to do.
So I want to tee this one up. We could talk for hours with you,
sure.
But want to be sensitive to your time. But I want you to kind of give us your thoughts on the significance of Muster in the Mountains as an event, first East Coast event of this size, and what it means in terms of supporting that long-term vision.
Man, I think the first thing I would say, and it's that community piece that we've been talking about, is bringing people together. I mean, again, we've talked about where all these people are coming from, and there's a ton of kids here, and then there's Richard Kaysen, who's hosting this, who's kind of on the end. He sees much less seasons. I think is the way Randy Newberg talks about it, like in his future.
Yeah.
Like he wants to pass on, and like when you see this, like in the womb of time, all these people that are here, like there's a hope that conservation is going to happen. So I would say that is the first piece. It's just this community piece is super exciting. Second piece is that we've got all these games that are going on. It's very interactive,
Right.
And so as we do more events, and our Rendezvous in particular, which is our big event that we do once a year, is how do we incorporate more hands-on stuff and getting people outside, And
Right.
like, again, like all these kids that are here, how we have stuff for them, to get them engaged. And because I always say this is that we're like these little cogs on the wheel right now, and we're doing as much as we can while we're on this earth. But somebody's gonna have to pick up this mantle when we're gone, and who is that going to be? And I think there's a lot of folks are aging out. And there hasn't been an organization that's kind of like that next generation of leaders. And I think that's one of the things that we're providing.
Right.
And that's why you want these kids to get engaged. I mean, I talked to some kids yesterday, 11 years old, and they did a 42-mile hike in the Bald Marshall Wilderness.
Jeez.
11 years old.
That's amazing.
Backpack, no horses, no llamas helping them out. And so that's like that next generation. So I think this event in particular is bringing people together, and then that energy goes home. And those little roots, from the tree. Maybe tentacles is not okay.
Yeah,
it's
right.
an octopus. And I don't
Right.
know what that is. Those roots go out, and so I think the significance of that just helps us grow even more out here in the East, and really, I think, get people engaged on issues that are out here, but also, make sure that they know that 640 million acres, it belongs to all of them.
Belongs to all of us. Yeah.
It's such and going back on that community piece, it's funny. I was working at the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg. I was working the Maven Optics booth, and people would come up and say they'd listen to the podcast or whatever.
Yeah.
And the guys from Maven said, they're like, 90% of people that listen to your podcast have either a BHA shirt or one of mine on or something. It's like, we could see your demographic.
Right.
And I'm like, it's just, they're all like-minded, people that are getting together. And now there's a kind of a place to be able to do that and be able to connect with them. And it's been super cool. We've only been here for, a few hours here today. Maybe more time has passed than I thought, but just awesome hearing from people and stories. Yeah. And I always ask, how'd you, get involved with BHA, or what made you come here? Just kind of, I love hearing the interesting.
Everyone's story, their path.
Totally.
But want to be sensitive to your time before Chris comes over and rustles the headsets off of us. But if you wouldn't mind, let folks out there that are listening know where they can find more information about BHA and how they can get involved.
Totally. So we have a very, I'm biased, but our website's awesome. It's backcountryhunters.org.
Yep.
It's not that we don't care about the anglers. That would have been really long, though. Backcountryhuntersandanglers.org, but it's backcountryhunters.org.
Metadata, right?
Yeah, right. And then, so that's that'll give you, you can dive deep into BHA there, and look at all the stuff that we're doing. if a day-to-day, like Instagram is probably like the best thing to see like what we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And whether that's events that we're doing all across the country, whether that's an issue like the Land and Water Conservation Fund that you can take action on, I think Instagram is a great place. And then once you become a member, you get connected to your local chapter, and so you'll get emails from them, and they'll tell you about events, they'll tell you about things going on in the state, things that are going on out in Washington D.C. And so I think like the best probably thing is to go check us out on our website, and then really start following us on social media. And then we're an open book, and if there's any ever questions, like don't hesitate to ask. Like there's nothing for us to hide, and I think that's refreshing a little bit.
Yeah.
That we call it like we see it.
Yeah. 100%. Well,
Yeah.
we're gonna let you get going.
Yeah, hey, I enjoyed this, and I'm sorry I was
Yeah.
getting cut off. Like it's been a good conversation.
We'll chat over beers later. It'll be cool.
What?
What? What are those? We don't do that. Appreciate your time, brother.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
man. It's been
Land,
awesome.
Hey,
Yeah.
awesome, Land.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah.
Land Tawney, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.